Hi everybody, Jorge here, and today I want to talk about emotional abuse. Namely, I want to talk about three things you never get in abusive relationships that can be used as clear indicators of abuse that can also inform your decision to walk away from those relationships. So, first of all, what is emotional abuse? Like, I have this very simple definition of it. Emotional abuse is when people encourage you to be vulnerable with them and then they use your vulnerability against you. Like, I'll make you fall in love with me and then I'll break your heart. And emotional abuse doesn't only happen in romantic relationships. It happens also in friendships and business relationships and the relationships between parents and kids. And basically, in evidence-based science, narcissistic abuse as one of the kinds of emotional abuse was first studied in parent-child relationships. And let me tell you, I personally experienced emotional abuse in every in every kind of relationships throughout my life. And partly that was related to the fact that I had really poor boundary setting skills, for the majority of my life. Like the skill of setting boundaries, of saying no, of communicating to people what's okay, what's not okay. It wasn't really modeled for me growing up. And so I experienced a lot of abuse because of this as a result of my own poor boundary setting skills. But you know what? It doesn't matter what is the reason why you are being targeted with emotional abuse. The one thing I know, both from personal experience and from my research over the recent years, that when emotional abuse is happening to you, it's really hard to detect. So it is, this gradual, insidious process that starts really small, that ends up completely destroying your self-worth, your sense of identity, and your sense of sanity in many cases. And emotional abuse, not always, but commonly, most often, it happens in those relationships where there is, an imbalance of power, when there are some unequal dynamics of power. So in those relationships when the ability to effect change predominantly lies in the hands of one person. And so that is the person that commonly becomes the abuser. And you know what? Like, I basically identified three things that you can detect in abusive relationships that are really easy to detect, even when you are the one to whom abuse is happening. Because you know what? When you are in that position, in the position of a target of emotional abuse, things may really not be very clear to you, but there are these three things that you can notice even from that position, and that even in the absence of some external support, of some safety network, of some people who can basically open your eyes to what's going on and encourage you to quit those relationships. Even without that, by seeing these three signs, these three things that you don't get in a relationship, you can understand, with very high probability that abuse is happening, and so that can inform your decision to walk away. So the first thing you never get in abusive relationships, obviously, is like those three things are like three C's. They are easy. They all start with C, so it makes it very easy to remember. And the first thing you never get in abusive relationships, the first C, is compassion. So that person in an abusive relationship, they show disregard for your feelings constantly. And when you are communicating how you feel to them, they make you feel like your feelings are either inadequate or irrelevant, or they're not legitimate, but they never practice empathy with you. So in some abusive relationships, you can get pity instead of empathy. And pity is very much different from empathy, and I have a video about that which I will put in the suggestion above. But the thing is that pity can be just one of the tools of abuse, of emotional abuse as well. And people who are abusing you may offer pity to you, under the in the disguise of empathy. But it's very easily felt. Like pity can be very easily told apart from empathy. You can feel it because pity is not helpful. Pity only drones you down emotionally further. Pity is, I'm so sorry for you, but I'm happy that I'm not you. I'm feeling super bad for you, but let's make it clear, I'm over here, you're over there. So that's pity. It's not empathy. And in other abusive relationships, the abuser may not even bother to fake empathy, to do something like pity in your face, and they feel so insensitive that it may, especially when it comes to people with narcissistic traits, it may look like they are completely incapable of empathy, like they lack this part of the brain that's responsible for empathy. And with narcissists, that's actually not the case, and we can discuss why in the description below, but in the comments below, so we can have this conversation about narcissistic personality disorder and people with narcissistic traits, and how they are, very commonly involved in emotional abuse. But the common thing in all abusive relationships, no matter whether it's an abusive friendship or an abusive parent-kid relationship or an abusive romantic relationship, is that you never get meaningful empathy. You never get that. And that makes a lot of sense because you cannot abuse someone and practice empathy with them at the same time. So obviously, when you don't have empathy constantly, that enables that person to continue abusing you. And so the second thing you never get in abusive relationships, the second C, is clarity. So what does it mean? When you notice that something is going wrong with that person, that something is not working, that they're hurting you, that, they're doing or saying something that is harmful or hurtful, and you approach them in a straightforward way about this, and you don't approach them with kind of anger or aggression or shaming or self-righteousness, but you approach them, with curiosity and generosity, really, with the intention to have a, benign, generous, empathetic conversation, an honest conversation. So when you do that, they never respond to it in a clear way. They either ignore you altogether, or if they respond in a way that confuses you even more about what's going on. So they never communicate their real intentions. They never communicate, how they really feel about you. Instead, they start to gaslight you. So what is gaslighting? Gaslighting is when people manipulate you into questioning your own sanity. And they do that, there are, gaslighting is I think a separate topic that's worth, a separate video for us to talk about. But gaslighting, the common signs that gaslighting is happening, the common language of gaslighting, those phrases that you can very easily detect as forms of gaslighting are these phrases: you know what, you're making this up. Nothing's wrong. What's wrong? You're just making this up. It's okay. No pasa nada. As we say in our Hispanic cultures. Or people might tell you, you're just too sensitive around this. Oh, you shouldn't be so sensitive. I didn't mean to hurt you. Or they might tell you, you know what, everything is okay. We're such good friends. Or I love you so much. And here's the thing. Even when you bring the evidence of their abusive behavior and you just put it in front of them, they will still deny it. They will still deny that something is not right. They will go to all lengths to deny reality and to deny your lived experience. And, Another common pattern of obscuring clarity in abusive relationships is so-called emotional swing. So what is the emotional swing? It is when this person will treat you like garbage, and then half an hour later, they approach you in a way that feels really loving and caring. So, for example, like in a phone conversation, they may first crush you down emotionally, and then, like 2 hours later, they will text you, "Oh, you know what? I love you so much. I'm just so grateful that we met. You bring so much value into my life." And that is, by the way, another technique of gaslighting. Because when like this inconsistent behavior on their part, this inconsistent communication, it makes you question your sanity and your perspective. And it effectively keeps you on the hook. Which leads me to the last point, which is closure. Like the last thing you never get in abusive relationships is closure. You just don't get that. Abusive relationships, by design, are never ended by the abuser. So they will make you feel like a total piece of crap, but they will never let you go. Why? Because they feed their ego with your pain. They just entertain themselves with your vulnerability. So they literally derive pleasure from hurting you. And so you might think, but wow, if they hate me so much, like I will wait for this day when they finally dump me. No, that will never happen. They derive pleasure from hurting you. And so that is why it's you who should take ownership and put an end to the abusive relationship. Instead of waiting for the abuser to just let you go after they get enough of your pain. They will never get enough of it. So you don't get closure in abusive relationships. You decide this is closed. You decide this is closed. And after you do that, there will be pleas, there will be apologies, there will be like a lot of manipulation. And if you buy into that and you will come back to this relationship, you will come back to this person, and will give them kind of second chance, the cycle of abuse will repeat again, but on a whole new level. And you know what? The question I get asked a lot is emotional abuse always intentional? Or there are some cases where it can be unintentional. Like, is the abuser doing the best they can? Can they be changed? Can I change who they are? And so here's the thing. For you as a target, it doesn't really matter whether abuse perpetrated on you is intentional or unintentional. You know, it's equally harmful anyway. It literally informs an existential threat for you anyway. The threat to your sanity. And in some cases, a threat to your survival. So, do I believe that abusive people are doing the best they can? Yes, I do. I do. And that is the exact reason why I say that we should walk away when we see those signs of abuse in our relationships. Because you cannot change who they are. They are who they are, regardless of who you are. And while they might actually need some professional help, it's not your job nor your responsibility to take care of them and to heal them, especially by being an emotional punchbag. Your job is to take care of yourself first, so you could take care of others next. And in abusive relationships, it can never work that way. And the final point is, another thing that I often get asked, Jorge, what do I do if I cannot end a relationship with my abuser? What if I understand that this person is abusing me, but I cannot end a relationship with them? What if I'm dependent on them financially? What if I'm a kid under legal age and, my parent abuses me? So, first off, you need to distinguish between two radically different types of situations here. And in order to do that, you have to ask yourself one question and answer to this really honestly. So when you say, I cannot end a relationship with that person, do you actually mean I cannot? Or do you mean I won't? Do you mean I will not? Do you mean I'm not willing? Because if you're an adult and you have your own source of income and you have your own roof over your head, then is it true that you cannot quit any relationship? No. Is it true that you can't cut that person off, because they're your family, because they're your relative, and you'll anyway have to confront them at another Thanksgiving dinner? It's not true. Well, you can cut them off. Whether it's your aunt or your cousin or your sibling or even your parent. You know what? Just because someone is biologically related to you doesn't give them a license to always remain part of your life regardless of their behavior. No. In fact, they are, you should hold them accountable for their behavior, just as you hold everybody else accountable for their behavior in your life. And in fact, people from your family are no more likely and no less likely to be abusers than a stranger on the street. But they can take advantage of this societal conditioning that if someone is your family, it's in your blood, they love you the most, so you should keep them on your life anyway. No, you shouldn't. You can just screw that societal conditioning and cut them off when you see that they're abusing you. And that is the first type of situations. But another type, the second radically different type of a situation is when you actually cannot cut that person off because you're dependent on them for your survival or your basic human need. So for example, you're a kid under legal age who is dependent on your abusive parent for food or shelter, or you are, you are in an abusive marriage and you are dependent on your spouse for money or for food because you're disabled, because you're unemployed, because you don't have your own source of income. And so, let me tell you, first, that is a very hard kind of experience, and I've been there personally. And so first of all, when you are in this kind of situation, be gentle to yourself first, and be kind to yourself, and don't allow this kind of situation make you think that you're weak, that you're unworthy. Just acknowledge the role of circumstances and the role of randomness in life in general and in your situation in particular. But then there are still some steps for you to follow in order to keep your sanity from being destroyed. First, here's what you do in an abusive relationship when you cannot quit it and you cannot walk away from it immediately. First, you minimize communication with your abuser. So you start talking to them, texting them as little as possible. You just minimize communication, the amount of communication. You bring it to the minimal level possible. Second is you disengage from them emotionally completely, which means you don't show your emotions in their face. You don't talk to them about how bad you feel, about how much you're hurt. No, your emotions, your feelings, your vulnerability are not for them to see. Absolutely. You disengage from them emotionally. The third thing is you set boundaries wherever possible. And as I have been in those situations, I know that when you're dependent on that person for your survival, for food, for shelter, for a basic human need, the ability to set boundaries is very limited. There are very few boundaries that can be effectively set in the relationship with that person. But some still can be. So think about it, look for those boundaries, and set them wherever they can be set. And the most important step, the most important thing here is you look for and you act upon the first opportunity to gain independence and walk away from that relationship. And I know that this can be very hard depending on your circumstances, but there's no other way. Unfortunately, there's no other way to change how you feel and to change how your life is going no other way than to walk away from that person and to put an end to your relationship with them and to cut them off in communication, block them, that just to make sure they stay the hell out of your life. Because you only have one life and you only have one you. And so no one deserves to take that away. So thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you take this message constructively, and I would love to hear from you. So please do leave me some comment below. Let's talk about emotional abuse. Let's discuss some stories and some experiences and some lessons that you might have derived from your experience of being in those relationships or bearing witness to those relationships in your life. And also, if you find this video insightful, inspiring, or helpful, don't hesitate to share it with your friend. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time on Jorge Oro's YouTube channel. Keep saying the truth, show up, be brave, stay curious, and take care, guys. Bye.